Hey, this is Dr. Osborn. Today we're here at Valencia Cove, and I'm going to be giving a lecture to about 200 people on longevity. We're going to be talking about things like strength training, proper nutrition, keeping stress levels at bay, supplements, you know, the usual. Come and check it out. So I knew this guy named John, not that John. John was a happy-go-lucky man. He had a beautiful family, a wife, and 2 children, made millions of dollars in real estate and mergers and acquisitions, and quite frankly, didn't have to work. And by all accounts, he was truly living the American dream. But John was morbidly obese. And despite our imploring him to better his health, John always used to default to this: my doctors will take care of me when I get sick, and that's what I have health insurance for. Unfortunately, John got COVID, with which he battled for nearly a year. And his doctors, upon whom he banked to save him at a specialized unit at Dartmouth, yes, they flew him from Jupiter Medical Center to Dartmouth ICU. Well, his doctors couldn't save him. And that was after he had had his throat cut open, so he had a tracheostomy, a feeding tube, and partial amputations of both of his legs. No amount of money could save John, nor his widowed wife, and his 2 beautiful children whom he left behind. You see, everything when you think about it is dependent upon your health. It is foundational to your ability to earn a living, spend time with family, friends, loved ones, and experience the world during the short time that you're walking on this earth. It is your most important asset. It is far more valuable than your biggest house or houses, your fastest cars, your largest diamond, and all the money in your safety deposit box combined. Because without it, you have nothing. But many of us don't realize this until it's too late. Until you're in the emergency room with some sort of life-threatening medical problem like a brain hemorrhage, and they're calling me to drill with a saw a window in your skull in order to evacuate the blood. Or COVID-19, like John. Most of us are too busy chasing the almighty dollar and high-stress jobs and distracted, so much so that our health falls by the wayside. And then you have the other percentage of the population who think it's not going to happen to me, or that their health insurance will take care of them when it does, like John. These are untruths. These are myths. You see, the system is actually not going to take care of you. Quite the opposite is true. The system is designed, or some people think it's rigged, to foster disease, not health. Big pharma and hospital systems revel in the sick. Filled hospital beds means big checks for hospital execs, right? And more prescriptions written. Everyone wins except you. But it can be different. There's a hedge, and that's up to you. You can live a longer, happier, and healthier life. We have the knowledge and the technology to optimize your health and prevent age-related disease. It's simply a matter of accessing your health by first choosing to prioritize it, making the decision to prioritize it. You must choose health. It is not a right, as many people believe. It is only a right to have access to it, but it will not be granted to you for free. Health takes work, and that work is simply an application of science, or what I say in a prescriptive manner to my patients: all you have to do is follow the science, and it's easier than you think. You can slow down the aging process and age gracefully. You can perform at optimal levels into your 70s, 80s, and 90s, despite former thinking to the contrary. We can learn new skills at any age, because as humans, we possess this remarkable capacity, this amazing capacity to learn and adapt to our environments. When I say environments, I'm not talking about the afternoon thunderstorm. I'm talking about the signals that we show our bodies, or to be more granular about it, the signals that we show our genes. These are the so-called epigenetics that you hear about in mainstream media. And quite frankly, these, the epigenetics, are the primary drivers of how well you age and the aging process itself, not your genes themselves. So let's take a deeper dive into the aging process. First and foremost, what is aging? Well, it has myriad definitions. I prefer this one because it dovetails on the concept of the environment, or the epigenetics that we just talked about. Aging is the lethal interaction between time, the clock is always ticking, your genome, your DNA, and the environment. And aging has recently been classified by the FDA as a disease by which we're all afflicted. You don't believe me? Well, ask yourself this question. What non-disease kills 100,000 people globally per day? And the answer is none. And no one is immune to it. Aging is believed to start at around age 16, after which time mortality rate, the chances of you dying, doubles every 8 years. So the older you get, chronologically speaking, and this just makes logical sense, the greater are your chances of dying. And to a great degree, this is because our biochemistry falters. What do I mean by this? Well, think about it. Sex hormone levels like testosterone and progesterone decline. Our ability to regulate our blood sugar deteriorates, so we become closer and closer to that insulin-resistant state. And stress hormone levels like cortisol increase. What happens? Well, these sort of prime the pump for the development of age-related diseases, lethal diseases, such as coronary artery disease, cancer, heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's disease. But what if you could do something about it? What if you could fight back against the aging process and actually grow biologically younger despite aging chronologically? What if you could be 65 chronologically, but 40 biochemically? Because after all, our health truly resides in our biology, in our biochemistry, in the lab work that your doctor draws every year. And the answer is, and as it turns out, you truly can. And how? I'm going to show you. So despite the inherent complexities of the aging process itself, there are several common underpinnings to aging and age-related disease. These are high levels of bodily inflammation, which is a topic you always hear about in the media, insulin resistance, so the pre-diabetic state, and free radical damage. The result? Damage to cellular structures, the accumulation of which leads to organ dysfunction like heart failure, renal failure, kidney failure, and ultimately death. And this is the hallmark of the aging process, accumulated internal damage. It's like rust accumulating in your car's chassis until it begins to crumble. But what if you were to coddle your car, maintain it in a well-humidified garage, kept its motor well-oiled? You can theoretically maintain it in a near-new state indefinitely, right? Like you see at the antique car shows. Now, I'm not saying that we can do this with humans and extend our lifespans or become immortal, at least not yet. But there is a ton of ongoing biogerontology research that is dedicated to solve this problem that is inherent to humans, namely that we die. And here's how it's going to go down. There is a concept known as the longevity escape velocity, coined by this guy, renowned biogerontologist Aubrey de Grey. He's a Brit. The longevity escape velocity, or biological escape velocity, is a hypothetical situation in which one's remaining life expectancy, not life expectancy at birth, your remaining life expectancy is extended longer than the time that is passing. So for example, in a given year in which the longevity escape velocity is maintained, technological advances would increase your remaining life expectancy for more than the year that just passed. So you grow chronologically older in a year, but technology affords us the ability to live an additional 2. And then you grow chronologically older another year, and then technology advances and it gives you the ability to live an additional 4. And so on, and so on, and so on. But in the interim, we still need to live until we reach the inflection point on that curve that futurists predict will occur somewhere between 2035 and 2040. So 10 to 15 years from now. It's likely, if you think about it, given that date, that the first person who will live to 1,000 years old, 1,000, it's likely that person is already walking amongst us, 1,000 years old. So the question is, how do you reach that inflection point on the curve where it goes parabolic? And distilled further, how do you reach that inflection point fully functional and with all of your faculties if you are currently in your 70s or 80s? Is there hope for you? Of course there is. It's simply a matter of showing your body the right signals. As I had said before, your body and brain have this remarkable ability, this capacity to adapt to stresses, or what I call applied pressure. And I'm not talking about barometric pressure or that your knees hurt when it's going to storm. I'm talking about the various stressors or the environment to which your body is exposed daily. And these stresses come in two forms: distress and eustress. So the term distress is just as it sounds, bad. More specifically, it's stress that lasts a while and leaves you worse off. It's demotivating. Contrast this with eustress, which is short-lived and actually makes you better. This is Nietzsche's "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger" stress, and that's precisely what you're after, not distress. Distress assumes many forms. You may perceive it as relationship or job-related stress, from which we've all suffered at points in our lives, but there are many others, and they accelerate the aging process. They make you biologically older than you are chronologically. How? Through their nasty and sinister effects on your biochemistry. So say, for example, you have a meal that is laden with simple carbohydrates: bread, pasta, rice, sugars essentially, staples of the standard American diet, which, by the way, is appropriately acronymized SAD or SAD, because that's truly what it is. Glucose levels in the blood skyrocket, and free radicals, which are basically electrons, damage the arterial walls, okay, by punching holes in them through a process known as oxidation. This is called oxidative stress, and for good reason. But there's more. When the arterial walls are damaged, an inflammatory process is kindled to repair it. So the fuse is lit. And how does the body repair the damage? By patching the small ulcerations with cholesterol, mostly LDL, or what is known as the bad cholesterol. So atherosclerosis is the body's response to nutritional stress or distress, namely the overconsumption of simple carbohydrates, so sugars essentially, coupled with our relatively sedentary lifestyles. Yes, our lack of exercise further accelerates the process. Why? Because muscles, they serve as glucose filters. They're the byproduct of exercise, right? And here's what happens. Sugar molecules in the bloodstream pass through the capillary beds within our muscles, and they're filtered out of the bloodstream. So the more muscle you have, the better the blood is filtered of sugar and the less potential damage done to the arterial walls, and therefore the less atherosclerosis. So muscles are your friends not only from a look buff on the beach standpoint, they're your friends from a metabolic and biochemical standpoint. And this, to a great degree, accounts for the protective effect of muscle. So let's unpack that a little bit, because I'm often asked, well, what types of exercises are best? In my opinion, there's just one, but it takes on many forms, and that's intense strength training. This type of training that nearly anyone at any age not only grows your pecs and biceps, but also turns on over 100 genes that are associated with longevity. It also increases the synthesis, the production of something that's called BDNF, which is an acronym for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So why is that important? What's the significance of that? Well, BDNF is integral to a process known as synaptogenesis, or the formation of nerve-to-nerve cell connections. It's how we learn, by forming connections and by forging pathways within the brain. It's also how memories are formed. It should be of no surprise to you, therefore, that the best way to preserve your memory as you age, and the best way to slow down or stave off dementia, it's not some $15,000 per month drug that's promulgated in the media. It's exercise, and more specifically, strength training. You know, they say the best things in life are free. Well, the age-old adage rings true again. So what type of strength training should you be doing? We know that most protocols out there work, at least for some ill-defined period of time. But stay away from the acrobatics that you see on social media and instead choose one that incorporates compound, basic, anabolic movements like a squat, a deadlift, an overhead press, a chin-up, a pull-up. These basic movements stress in a good way. This is use stress the entire body and are therefore extremely efficient. They've made humans strong and best emulate tasks of everyday life. So what do I mean by this? Well, say for example, your spouse asked you to move a box from here in the house in the foyer to the back room, right? That's a deadlift. And by virtue of your familiarity with the mechanics of the movement, you're less likely to injure your back. And no, deadlifts are not bad for your back. Bad deadlifts are bad for your back. If deadlifts weren't good for your back, I wouldn't be prescribing them to my post-op spine surgery patients. And I do very early on at around the 6-week mark. Why? Because deadlifts strengthen the very muscles that we cut through during spine surgery to access the spine. So let's switch gears for a little bit and talk about nutrition. To support your protective muscle, to help you recover from heavy bouts of strength training, you must eat. But don't turn this into too much of a science project. Internet fad diets will fall short long term, so stay off the various forums touting the latest and greatest, and delivering nothing, by the way, and stick to the basics, just like with strength training. A low glycemic anti-inflammatory protocol, which basically means very, very low sugar, tends to work best, is easy to follow, and will grant you the biochemical health that lowers your risk for vascular disease, so stroke and heart attack, and cancer. Low glycemic index protocols maintain muscle while driving insulin levels down, and this is the signal for the body to burn fat, low insulin levels. It thereby keeps you lean. Remember, a leaner body, a leaner muscular body, is always a healthier body. So what are the tricks do Blue Zone residents incorporate to extend their health span? Well, they place significant emphasis on family and socialization, so it's not uncommon to find multi-generational homes and social gatherings that course late into the night, often with dancing. Because remember, interacting with others is integral to our humanness. Without social interaction, being alone in essence, the mind falters and the body follows in kind. Aloneness is a distress, not a eustress. Think of the show Alone, I think it's on the Discovery Channel, and how many contestants tap out, not by virtue of the fact that they are starving or that they've been critically injured, but by virtue of the fact that they miss interacting with others, be it family or friends. Socialization does the exact opposite. It lowers stress by lowering the stress hormone cortisol that we're all familiar with, just like sleep does, and that's why it's so important to sleep. It also induces a sense of happiness. You know, the kind during which time seems to fly by quickly. Scientists call this flow state, and there's an emerging field of science called positive psychology that is attempting to unravel the mechanisms behind flow so that everyone can access it via so-called flow inducers or flow triggers. Interestingly, extreme sports athletes also take advantage of flow state to improve performance. Why? Because it heightens focus while concomitantly reducing anxiety about an impending stunt. Say a 5,000-foot cliff jump with nothing more than one of those squirrel suits and a parachute. Flow state can similarly be accessed through meditation, ideally once or twice per day for 20 minutes, and something as simple as an outdoor walk or gardening. And surprise, surprise, Blue Zone residents spend a ton of time outdoors, either walking or gardening into their 90s and even longer. Because the novel stimulation, and that's critical, the novelty of it is critical, keeps not only their minds, but their bodies young. So, this is one of the many journaling notebooks of my significant other Melissa's late great aunt, Loretta. I know you can't read it, some people are squinting in the back. She died several months ago, fully functional at the age of 96. COVID ironically got her, but not a week before, she was as active as ever, just as she had been her entire life. So let's take a look at one of the many thousands of journal entries, and there are many notebooks with hundreds and hundreds of entries. So she was 82 or 83 at the time. It was a cloudy morning, but warm. I put a bag of salt in the softener. I went out and mowed the yard. She's 82. Just finished, and it started to rain, so I didn't trim. I read the paper, had lunch, went to the bank in Tipton, which is a small town in Indiana where my significant other grew up, and renewed a CD. Then to Luz, who's her nephew, who owned an auto body shop, and dropped off old paint buckets and oil cans. She's 82. Went to see Irene, socialization, and gave her two sacks of candy, came home and had supper, then made some chili soup. Raymond came over with 3 Mother's Day cards and asked me to mail them for him. I watched TV and read, and I went to bed at 11 o'clock. So these activities should sound familiar and somewhat reminiscent of Blue Zone residents, right? So not only was Loretta physically active, seeking out novel things to do, but she chronicled them, and the act of writing and creating for no one but herself. She wasn't selling these things, right? Kept her mind healthy and allowed her to stave off Alzheimer's disease. Loretta died with a fully functional brain with all her wits about her. She even wrote her own eulogy, arranged her own funeral, and paid for her own funeral. That's how thoughtful she was. Loretta had her health up to the last week of her life, literally, because her brain was working, because she exercised it daily. And the same goes for my grandma Hannah, who also lived to the ripe old age of 96 and did crossword puzzles and the daily jumble in the paper right until the very end. I remember calling her once and asked her, she was 91 at the time, and I asked her what she got for 12 down. And she said, "It's ecru, you know, the color. What's wrong with you?" 91, and still driving then, by the way, for better or for worse, but nevertheless a testimony to her sound mind. Ron, I think you know Grandma Hannah, right? Yes, you do. Because really, that's where health begins. It begins between your ears, in your mind. This is a top-down approach to health. You must first believe that you are not a victim of the failed, and it is a failed, healthcare system. That there is something more out there, that you can not only live longer, but live better. You don't have to live out your golden years, you know, the time you work so hard to enjoy in less than good health, frail and with limited mobility, on the downslope of that curve in the graph from the earlier slide. Age is just a number, and if you educate yourself and do things to preserve your health, and more importantly, your functionality, you can not only learn new skills, but also keep up with your kids and grandkids into your 70s, 80s, and 90s. So let's do a quick recap of things everyone in this room can do to extend your health span today. I'm going to add several things, more esoteric techniques that move the needle just a little bit, but are not primary drivers of longevity. So first and foremost is exercise, as we had discussed. Exercise must be hard, it must challenge you mentally and physically in order to turn on the switches that are associated with longevity, that allow you to build muscle and stay strong lifelong. Put more simply, you must lift weights and breathe hard during your workouts. Exercise is not walking around the block with your friends, that is activity. Let me repeat that. Exercise is not walking around the block with your friends, that is activity. And while beneficial from a health standpoint, just like gardening has proven beneficial in blue zone regions, walking is not a substitute for strength training. It simply does not provide enough of a stimulus or eustress to generate a response at the muscular level. And remember, and I can't say this enough, muscle is protective of the body, so amass it and maintain it at all costs. And I know what you're thinking, well, what about my heart? Well, you should also add some cardio, albeit at a lower frequency, because it's simply unnecessary if you're strength training properly. What does that mean? Choosing a protocol that incorporates compound anabolic movements like squats, bench press, deadlift, overhead press, and a chin-up or a pull-up. I know, you think you can't do them. Well, it's just that, a thought. Don't sell yourself short. You are capable of far more than you are currently doing. Everyone in this room, this is a fact. Most of us are underperforming in the realms of physicality. Just take a look around. We as a society can do better. Now marry exercise with a good diet, and you'll not only keep your blood sugars in check, staving off diseases like diabetes and obesity, but you'll also minimize free radical damage and thereby reduce your risk of vascular disease and cancer. Remember, these are the diseases that kill us. It's heart attack and stroke first. Everyone here, I'm sure, knows that, and cancer following closely behind. You prevent these age-related diseases, and you'll extend your health span. That formula is not that difficult. The problem is that our minds are constantly being hijacked by noise, by distraction in the form of text messages, emails, and social media, right? These are distresses. Forget about it. So whether it's an advertisement from a fast food joint or a video chronicling, say, your neighbor's ski vacation, your attention is being diverted, distracted from more important endeavors like your health. Time is wasted. It's almost as if there's no time left in the day in this very fast-paced world in which everything is accessible. Everything is available at our fingertips, right? Except one thing, your health. You can't order your health on Amazon. Right? What you can order, however, is a blood pressure cuff and a blood glucose monitor. And from the comfort of your home, you can take an instantaneous snapshot of your health. Blood glucose and blood pressure are two excellent barometers of health, so track them at home, log them, and discuss the results with your doctor. Again, just follow this formula, and both of those parameters, your blood pressure and your blood glucose, will improve. And then people always ask me about supplements. Well, they too will help optimize your health. Most people buy supplements on a whim or at the advice of a friend, family member, but quite frankly, most people are confused. You go into GNC and you see floor-to-ceiling supplements, 12,000 of them, and you have no idea which one to buy. So why not stick to 4 basic ones that we know work based upon the data and thousands of patient hours worth of experience? These are high doses of omega-3s, and we'll go over these later. B-complex, vitamin D3, and a probiotic. You want to add to your supplement list later, you want to buy things like cat's claw, somebody tells you, so be it, that's your choice. But stick to the 4 basic ones that we use in our clinic. No one leaves the office without these 4 staples. And rare is the person who leaves our clinic without some sort of hormone replacement therapy. Optimal health means optimal hormone levels. That means levels, this testosterone, et cetera, that are greater than the 75th percentile. If your levels are lower than this, despite your doctor telling you that you have normal testosterones, you will likely benefit from some sort of bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Let me repeat that. If your levels are lower than the 75th percentile, despite the fact that your doctor tells you that they're normal, you will likely benefit from some sort of hormone replacement therapy. So bring this up during your next office visit with your doctor because it can make a dramatic difference in your quality of life. And after all, who wants to be normal when you can be optimal? And then there are even more fringy ways to hack your health, to move the needle even further. These techniques are often profiled in the media because some, quite frankly, sound ludicrous. The commonality, however, is that all are forms of so-called eustress that we've been discussing. This is good bodily stress that when applied carefully in proper doses results in a positive adaptive response and improves your physiology, not worsens it like this stress. Exercise is a form of eustress, and so is eating your rainbow of vegetables, believe it or not. But there are many others. Deliberate cold exposure. How many people in here have been in a plunge pool? Anybody? 1, 2? Good. What about in a hot sauna that's 175 or 180 degrees? Not the one that's 110. Anybody? Right? What about alternating between the two? Right? I'm going to Colorado next week, and there's a plunge pool that's just adjacent to one of these very, very hot saunas. So back and forth, do it for about 10 minutes, a couple of times a week. But there are others. Intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, 5-day water fasts, right? We've all heard of these things. And to me, the most important one is daily mental stimulation. This may take the form of a crossword puzzle, like my grandma Hannah used to do, picking up a new musical instrument, learning a new language, picking up a new sport. How many pickleball players are in the room? One, yeah, good, a bunch, right? That's terrific. Or journaling, like Aunt Loretta. Distilled down, it's about showing your body and your mind a novel stimulus or getting uncomfortable. You must learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's good for your brain. Because let's face it, once you reach age 50, if you're not continually applying pressure to the system, you're regressing. You're aging mentally, physically, and biochemically. And this is why nearly 30% of retirees, 30% of retirees are depressed, which is much higher than the 10% prevalence of depression across the nation. You'd think that this would be the opposite, that retiring would evoke this sense of, or invoke this sense of happiness, but it's not the case for many. One of the primary reasons for this has to do with the brain itself. Relatively devoid of stimulation, work, for example, the brain's connectivity falters. And the loss of social interaction, like with work colleagues, for example, wreaks havoc on the frontal and the parietal lobes of the brain. You combine these two, and you have an unhappy brain and a state of accelerated aging. You do the opposite, stay engaged mentally and physically, eat properly, keep stress levels at bay, basically follow the science, and you'll have your health, and with that, happiness. More happiness than any amount of money could buy. So if I haven't taught you anything today, it's that health is a choice. All you have to do is show your body the right signals, and it will respond in kind. And there's no better time to do it than now, regardless of your age. Nothing else matters, as without your health, you have nothing. Like John. Or as I always say to my patients, there is nothing more important than your health. I appreciate the time today.